a man returns to his family's old mansion, only to find the ghost of a woman his ancestor betrayed, and she's been waiting for him to finish their last dinner. What begins as a haunting turns into a chilling inheritance he can't escape.
It started like any other Thursday night. The air outside was warm and heavy, carrying that faint scent of rain that never actually came. I stood by the kitchen counter, swirling a glass of red wine in my hand, trying to calm the faint tremor that had settled in my fingers. Mark, my husband, was humming softly as he set the table, 4 plates, polished silverware, and the linen napkins we never used except when we wanted to look like we had our lives together. We hadn't hosted anyone in months. Life had been busy, or at least that was the excuse we told people. In truth, things between us had grown quiet. Not peaceful quiet, but the kind that hums just before something snaps. So when Mark told me he'd invited his old college friend, Daniel, over for dinner, I smiled, said it sounded wonderful, and poured myself another glass of wine. "Relax," Mark said as he brushed past me, carrying a tray of roasted vegetables. "You're acting like this is a job interview." "I just don't know why we're doing this," I said, forcing a smile. "We barely go out anymore, and suddenly you want to have people over?" He gave me that look, the one that said, "Not tonight, please." And so I bit my tongue. By the time the doorbell rang, the candles were lit, the food was plated, and my reflection in the hallway mirror looked calm, composed, and completely fake. Daniel was exactly the kind of man you could forget until he smiled. He had that easy charm, the kind that disarmed you before you realized he'd already taken measure of the room. His hair was flecked with gray, his suit perfectly fitted, but casual enough to look effortless. "Sarah," he said, taking my hand between both of his. "Finally, I meet the woman who managed to make Mark settle down. I was starting to think she didn't exist." I laughed politely, but something in the way he looked at me, too long, too direct, made my stomach tighten. Dinner started pleasantly enough. We talked about college stories, vacations, mutual acquaintances. Daniel was the kind of guest who carried conversation easily, guiding it like a conductor without ever seeming to try. And yet, the more he spoke, the more I felt an invisible thread pulling tighter across the room. At one point, while I refilled Daniel's wine, he said, "You know, Mark and I used to get into a lot of trouble back in the day. He always knew how to talk his way out of things." Mark chuckled, but I noticed the way his hand froze for a second over his fork. "Oh, don't tell her all that." "Why not?" Daniel leaned back, smirking. "Old secrets can be fun, unless some of them aren't so old." There was a silence then, short but heavy, like a single drop of ink falling into a glass of water. I glanced at Mark, but he was already changing the subject, asking Daniel about his work, his wife, his recent move back to the city. "I didn't know you were married," I said. "Was," Daniel replied, and for the first time his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "It didn't end well, but you know how things go. Life has a funny way of showing you who people really are." I murmured something sympathetic, but my mind had already drifted elsewhere. Mark hadn't mentioned Daniel in years. Why now? Why this sudden reunion? As dinner went on, the atmosphere shifted, subtly at first. Daniel's questions grew more pointed, his tone less friendly, and the glances he exchanged with Mark began to carry weight I couldn't read. "So, Sarah," he said, his voice low and smooth, "do you believe people can change, or do you think we're all just pretending until the truth catches up?" I hesitated. I think people can change, if they really want to." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on Mark. "I used to think that too." Mark's fork clinked softly against his plate. "Daniel, enough. Let's not turn this into a philosophy debate." "Of course," Daniel said with a shrug, though his smirk said otherwise. When I stood to clear the table, he offered to help, but Mark refused, saying we had dessert ready. Still, Daniel followed me into the kitchen, leaning casually against the counter as I gathered plates. "You make a lovely home," he said, glancing around. "It's hard to imagine Mark in a place like this, so stable." I smiled tightly. He's changed a lot since college, I guess. Has he? Daniel tilted his head. Or has he just learned to hide it better? My hands stilled on the counter. I'm not sure what you mean. He took a step closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. Sometimes people bury things so deep they forget where they put them, but secrets have a way of clawing their way back up. The sound of Mark's footsteps broke the tension, and I turned quickly to the sink, pretending to wash dishes. Everything okay in here? Mark asked, his tone too light. Perfect, Daniel said, flashing that charming grin again. Your wife was just telling me how much she trusts you. I forced a laugh, but Mark didn't join in. For a moment, the three of us just stood there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the refrigerator and the faint crackle of candlelight from the dining room. When Daniel finally left that night, his goodbye was polite, almost warm, but as he shook Mark's hand, he said something I barely caught, something that made Mark's jaw tighten and his smile vanish the moment the door closed. What did he say? I asked. Nothing, just catching up. But as I stood at the window watching Daniel's car disappear down the street, I couldn't shake the feeling that we had just entertained someone who hadn't come for dinner, but for revenge. And Mark knew exactly why.
The morning after the dinner, the house smelled faintly of wine and candle wax. For a few minutes, I managed to convince myself that everything that happened last night was just nerves, the trick of the light, a hallucination born out of loneliness and too much red wine. Except for one thing. The dining table still had 2 used plates. One was mine, the other was scraped clean. My fork lay exactly where I left it, but the second plate had been moved an inch to the right, the wine glass half empty, a faint red lipstick print on its rim. I don't wear lipstick. I told myself maybe I'd imagined the lipstick mark, that it was a reflection or smudge. Still, something about that pale ring of red felt too deliberate, too human. I reached for my phone, opened the call log and checked the last number dialed. It was her again. Unknown caller, 10:47 p.m. That was the exact time I'd poured the second glass of wine. Around noon, I went for a walk just to get out of the house. The air was crisp, full of autumn leaves and the faint metallic scent of the rain that was coming. When I passed the old cemetery at the end of the street, I froze. There was a bouquet of lilies resting against the black iron gate. Tied to it was a folded note. My name was on it. The handwriting was neat, elegant, unmistakably feminine. Dinner was lovely. You've always had such good manners. I'll see you again when the clock strikes 11. No signature. When I got home, I tried to rationalize it. Someone was messing with me. Maybe a neighbor, maybe my ex, maybe someone who'd found out I was living alone now. But that didn't explain how the plate had been moved, or why the note had my full name on it, middle initial and all. Only my mother used to write it that way, and she'd been dead for 7 years. I didn't want to wait for 11, so I tried to leave. I grabbed my coat, my keys, my phone, but when I reached the door, the lock wouldn't turn. The key twisted halfway, then jammed hard. I pulled, twisted again, nothing. A faint tapping sound echoed from the dining room. Tap, pause. Tap, pause. It was rhythmic, intentional, like someone stirring a spoon in a teacup. "Hello?" I said, shaking my voice. The tapping stopped. I turned toward the table and saw the second chair had been pulled out. The plate, once empty, now held a slice of roast and a small piece of bread, the exact meal I'd made the night before, except this time steam rose from it, fresh, warm. And across from it, in the candlelight that somehow flickered to life on its own, sat she. Pale face, hollow eyes, a faint sorrowful smile. "Why didn't you wait for me?" I couldn't move, couldn't speak. She leaned forward, her hands resting delicately on the edge of the table. "You promised, remember? Every year, the same day, the same dinner." I don't... "You forgot me once," she said, her voice suddenly cold. "You won't forget again." The candle flames elongated, stretching unnaturally tall, dancing in a breeze I couldn't feel. Her face flickered like a dying film reel, young, then old, then skeletal, then human again. She stood up slowly and reached across the table. Her fingers grazed mine, ice cold, but real. Then she leaned in, her lips almost brushing my ear. "I'm still hungry." The lights went out. When they came back on, she was gone. The food was gone. The chair was empty. But written on the inside of my palm, in faint red lipstick, were the words, "Tomorrow, 11."
I didn't sleep that night. The house groaned and sighed with every gust of wind, as if something was walking along the hallway, stopping outside my door, listening. Every shadow on the wall looked like her silhouette, and the message, "Tomorrow, 11," still faintly stained my hand, no matter how many times I washed it. When dawn finally came, I decided I was done with that house. I'd pack, leave, and never look back. But the moment I grabbed my suitcase and reached for the front door, the key refused to turn. It was jammed solid, like the lock had been welded shut overnight. And then I heard it again. Tap, tap, tap. That slow, rhythmic sound echoing from somewhere down the hallway. The same sound I'd heard before dinner. The noise led me to the old gallery, a narrow passage lined with portraits of relatives I barely remembered. It always smelled like dust and cold wood, a part of the house nobody entered anymore. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. But then I noticed one painting, a large portrait of my great-grandparents, had been slightly moved. The nail marks behind it formed a faint square outline, as if something else used to hang there. Curiosity pushed me closer. I lifted the frame off the wall, coughing as a cloud of dust filled the air. And there it was. Another painting. Hidden beneath. Smaller, darker, nearly black with age. A woman's face. The same face I'd seen at the dinner table. My chest tightened. I wiped away the dust and the image grew clearer. Pale gray eyes, brown curls, and a faint smile that seemed alive. She wore a crimson dress. A name was carved into the bottom edge of the frame. Evelyn H. I didn't remember anyone named Evelyn in my family. But as I stared into those painted eyes, I could swear they flickered with light, like she was watching me. The grandfather clock in the living room began to chime 11 times. But that couldn't be right. My phone said 10:25. Each strike of the clock vibrated through the house like thunder, and after the last note faded, a whisper floated through the gallery. "You came back." I spun around. She was there. Evelyn. No longer a memory, not a painting, but standing in the hallway, her red dress flowing as though underwater. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "What do you want from me?" I managed to whisper. She tilted her head, that same faint smile curling her lips. "You left me waiting," she said softly. "The dinner was never finished." Her voice was gentle, but there was something in it, hurt, longing, maybe even accusation. "Who are you?" I asked. Her gaze softened, almost pitying. "You already know." Before I could move, the air around us rippled like a heat wave, and the gallery disappeared. I was standing in another room, larger, lit by flickering candles, the scent of wine and roast filling the air. A grand table stretched before me, surrounded by elegantly dressed guests. Laughter echoed faintly, and at the head of the table sat a man who looked exactly like me. My heart pounded. The man raised a glass, smiling at Evelyn seated beside him. She looked alive, radiant, and happy. Then the scene changed. The same table, now empty, the candles almost burnt out. The man, me, stood shouting, face twisted with rage. Evelyn cried, clutching her arm. A crash, a scream, the sound of shattering glass, and then silence. The vision broke. I stumbled backward into the real hallway, gasping for air. The oat-down painting lay shattered on the floor, the canvas ripped straight through Evelyn's face. I tried to convince myself I'd imagined it all, but then the floor creaked, softly, slowly, and from the corner of my eye, I saw movement near the front window. The old oak tree outside was swaying violently, even though the air was completely still. Something compelled me to go outside. I didn't even grab my coat. The night was freezing. The wind had no sound, only the deep, hollow rustle of branches. Beneath the oak, the ground looked disturbed, as if someone had dug there recently. My pulse thundered. I knelt down and brushed the dirt away. Beneath the first few inches, my fingers hit something solid, wood, an old rotted plank. I dug faster until I uncovered the outline of a small box, not quite a coffin, but old enough to crumble at the edges. With shaking hands, I pried it open. Inside was a folded red dress, clean, untouched by time. The fabric shimmered faintly even in the dark. And resting atop them, a dinner plate, white, porcelain, unbroken. The same pattern as the ones from last night's table. A whisper drifted through the trees. "You never finished the meal." I looked up, and Evelyn stood across from me, her hair stirring in the wind, though the air around her was perfectly still. "You waited for me," she said softly. "Through every winter, through every silence, I waited for you to remember." My voice broke. "What do you mean, me?" "You were there. You promised me forever, and forever came again." She stepped closer, and I could see tears on her face. Not ghostly, real. "They buried me here. You buried me here." The ground trembled. The branches overhead moaned like something alive. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots. "You don't understand," I said, trembling. "No, you don't." Then she vanished, fading into mist that scattered across the dirt. Only the dress and the plate remained. And as I stared down, a folded note appeared on top of them, ink glistening wet as though freshly written. "One more dinner, 11. Now, sitting in the dark living room, I can hear the clock ticking again. It's 10:42. The table is set for 2. One plate for me, one for her. I know I should run, leave the house, forget everything, but something inside me whispers that if I do, she'll never stop following. And if I stay, if I finish the dinner, maybe the haunting will end. The clock ticks louder. Outside, the oak tree sways again, and from somewhere deep within the walls, I hear the softest sound. Tap, 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 like footsteps coming closer.
The clock struck 11. Each chime echoed through the house like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, and cruel. I sat at the dining table, staring at the 2 plates in front of me. The air smelled faintly of candle wax and damp earth. The red dress lay folded beside the second chair, exactly where I had found it. I hadn't lit the candles. I hadn't cooked the food. But somehow, both plates were full. Steam rose from them, carrying the scent of roasted meat and red wine, just like before. The wine glass trembled slightly, as if someone unseen had just set it down. And then she appeared. Evelyn. She looked almost human now, no longer ghostly, not entirely solid either. Her skin was pale, her eyes glimmered like frost, and her crimson dress shimmered with a faint inner light. She smiled softly, the same way she had in the painting. "You came," she whispered. "I didn't have a choice. You wouldn't let me leave. She only asked for dinner, just one more meal." I should have been terrified, but I wasn't.
There was something hypnotic about her voice, something that pressed on my memory, like an old dream clawing its way back. We sat in silence for a while. The sound of the clock ticking filled the room. She lifted her glass, motioning for me to do the same. "To promises kept," she said. "To peace," I murmured, though I wasn't sure whose. The first sip burned down my throat. The wine was thick, metallic, and for a moment I could taste blood. I coughed, setting the glass down, but she only smiled. "Do you remember the last dinner?" she asked softly. I didn't answer. My pulse quickened. The shadows along the walls began to twist, reshaping themselves into flickering figures, faint outlines of people seated around the table. I recognized them now. My family. Generations of them, watching in silence. And at the head of the table sat the man who looked exactly like me. Older, sharper, with the same eyes. It hit me like a wave. The visions, the voices, the hidden portrait. I wasn't just a visitor in this house. I was part of it. The man in the vision, the one who killed her, was my ancestor. A mirror of my face bound to her forever. The curse wasn't random, it was inherited. Evelyn leaned closer, her eyes glistening. "He made me a promise," she whispered. "He said he would love me beyond death. He broke it when he took my life. So I waited for the one who would carry his soul back to me." "You think that's me?" I asked, trembling. "I don't think. I know." Her voice softened. "You are the echo of his sin." I stood, pushing the chair back. "No, I didn't do anything to you." "But you did," she said gently. "You forgot me. You tried to bury me again." Her words cut through me like ice. "It wasn't me," I shouted. "I didn't even know you existed." The lights flickered. Every candle in the room flared bright white, then went out. The darkness swallowed everything except her. Evelyn glowed faintly, her outline trembling. "I waited too long," she whispered. "You have to finish what he started." The ground beneath us creaked, splitting slightly down the middle. A rush of cold air poured from below, smelling of earth and decay. "Finish the meal," she said. "Set me free." I looked down at the plate in front of me. The food was gone. In its place lay something else. A small silver key. Old, tarnished, and warm to the touch. "What's this?" I asked. "The door," she said. "You'll know which one." The moment I touched the key, my vision blurred. The walls melted away, revealing a staircase I'd never seen before, spiraling down beneath the house. The basement. I followed the glow of her presence as she drifted ahead of me, her footsteps soundless. The deeper we went, the colder the air became. At the bottom, there was a single wooden door, small, plain, almost fragile. The key fit perfectly. When I turned it, the hinges groaned, and the scent of damp soil filled my lungs. Inside, candlelight flickered on stone walls. And there, against the far side of the room, was the table. The same table from upstairs, except covered in dust, cobwebs, and dried blood. 2 chairs faced each other. Evelyn floated to one of them and sat down gracefully. "This is where it ended," she said quietly, "and where it will end again." She motioned for me to sit. My body moved before my mind could protest. The table between us was bare. No plates, no glasses, just the faint outline of where they once sat. "Do you forgive me?" I asked. "It's not forgiveness I want. It's remembrance." A tear slid down her cheek. "He tried to erase me from history, from blood, but every story leaves a trace. Every lie leaves an echo." I leaned forward. "Then let me end it. Tell me how." Her hand reached across the table, fingers cold, but real against mine. "Promise me you won't forget again," she said. "I promise." Her smile was faint, trembling. "Then it's done." The ground began to shake. Dust fell from the ceiling. The candles flared, then went out completely. I heard her voice one last time, soft, almost a sigh. "Thank you." And then the room collapsed into darkness. When I woke, I was lying on the living room floor. The house was silent. The table was empty. The red dress was gone. Outside, the oak tree had fallen, split clean down the middle. I thought it was over, until I noticed the portrait in the hallway. It was no longer just my great-grandparents. The second hidden painting, the one I had torn down, was gone. In its place hung a new one. A man and a woman, seated at a table, her in a crimson dress, him with my face, their hands intertwined. That was 3 nights ago. I've tried leaving since, but every road leads back to the same house. And tonight, as I write this, I can hear footsteps upstairs. Slow, careful. She's walking again. Not angry, not sad, just waiting for dinner, for me, forever.